Hello, my little mathematicians. Today, we're going to focus on writing an equation from a word problem. And I'm going to teach you a hack that I wish my teacher would have taught me. Okay, it's going to make it so much easier. So, first of all, let's focus on this word problem right here. On your cell phone bill, you are charged 25 cents for each text you send. Okay. This is before the day of unlimited. You used to get charged per text. Okay. And some people, like my one friend, still has this outdated plan. So 25 cents for each text you send. From here, they want you to identify the independent and dependent variable and write the equation. So here's the hack that I'm going to show you. Right here, where it says the charge per text, that is not the independent or the dependent variable. That's known as your rate per item. It doesn't change. No matter what, you are always charged 25 cents per text, okay? You look for words like per, each, every, and that's going to give you the rate, which is the number that goes in front of your x, okay, in your equation that you're going to write. And what's great is the rate of change, sometimes later on, they're going to call it the slope. It's in the form of y over x. So if it says charge per text, this is your y, this is your x, okay? And remember, what's what? Your independent variable is what? Is it the y or is it the x? Well, I remember I always start with the dependent one first. It's easier for me. I say, okay, your dependent variable depends upon what you do to the independent one. So your y, which is always the one in front of the word per, depends on what you do to the x. And x comes after the word per. So y per x, y over x. It's the ones that surround your word per. So the number that goes with your rate is the thing that goes in front of x, and then it gives you the units that identify your y from your x. And you're like, what? I don't get it. Okay, so the charge, that's talking about money per number of texts that you send. So the y, the dependent, is talking about the charge. Well, which one is that? Is it the number of texts or the amount of money? The charge is your amount of money, right? And then your x right here is the text. So the number of texts that you send is your independent. So it basically just told you the answers of which one's the independent and which one's the dependent. Okay, you could also ask yourself, like, what depends upon what? Well, how much you're charged depends upon how many texts you spent or sent. Okay, that helps too, but I like this little hack right here. Now, this also helps you write your equation, okay? Remember the word with the per, each, or every, that is your rate. So I'm going to say that the rate is 25 cents, right? And that number goes in front of x. And then there's your y. This is pretty much always how it's going to be. It's going to be y equals something x. And your rate is the number that goes in front of the x. Sometimes, instead of using y equals something times x, they might tell you specific variables to use. So they say, let b represent the amount on your bill and let s represent the number of texts you sent. So what do you think goes where? Well, the amount on your bill depends on the number of texts that you send, because you're 25 cents per text. So if you send 0 texts, 0 times 25 is 0. You don't owe anything. If it's 1 text, 1 times 25 is 25, so you owe 25 cents. 2 texts would be 50 cents. 3 cents would be 75 cents. Okay, so x and y are the things that you can actually like plug numbers into. So notice how I said, if I send 2 texts, how much am I charged? Well, 2 for s or x would be 2 times 25, which is 50. So then I get 50 cents for on my bill. You can also plug something in for y sometimes. Like, what if you only had $1 that you could spend? I know that's really cheap. All you can spend is $1. So how many texts can you send? Well, $1 equals 0.25x. So you could only send 4 texts if all you had total was $1. So you can plug numbers in for x and y, but this always stays 25 cents no matter what. So your rate of change doesn't change. Let's see if we can do that same type of logic for this problem right here. It says Cassie was camping and wanted to rent a canoe. It was $10 for each hour she rented the canoe. What's your equation to find out how much it will cost to rent the canoe? Well, it's y equals $10 times x. Okay, or you could say, how much you have to pay depends upon how many hours you rent the canoe, and it's $10 per hour. Okay, in case they wanted you to use actual, like, other variables that made sense. But typically we'll use y and x. Now, to identify your independent and dependent, remember it's $10 per hour. So y is the dollars. After the word per, each, or every is your x. So y is the dependent because your answer depends upon what you do to the x. And now it just basically gave the answer. So y is the money she has to pay. And x is the hours. So the number of hours the canoe is rented. Okay, and it makes sense. How much money you have to pay depends upon how long you rented the canoe for. And then they're going to actually ask you to solve some problems. Now that you have your equation, if she rented the canoe for 4 hours, how much would she owe? So I'm going to plug in for your h or x 4 hours, and that's going to tell me how much money I have to pay. Well, 10 times 4 is 40. So you would have to pay $40 if you rented the canoe for 4 hours. If you got those right, awesome. Why don't you go ahead and try the next two on your own? And by the next two, I actually meant skip number 2, try number 3. Unless you feel pretty daring, then you can try number 2, but it has a little trick that we haven't talked about just yet. Okay, so you paused the video, you tried it, you unpaused it, and now you're back with us. So if you did number 3, I know I'm skipping 2. 3 says Joseph is riding his bike at a rate of 4 miles per hour. So this is my rate. And y is the miles, x is the hours. Your dependent is your y because it depends upon what you do to the x. So y is miles. It's the number of miles he goes, or how far he goes, however you want to phrase it. It's the thing that's talking about miles. And then x is the number of hours. So the number of hours he rides his bike. Now to write your equation, it even specified it wanted to drive in x hours. So it wants you to use y and x. So y equals, what's your rate? It's 4 miles per hour. If Joseph rode for 6 hours, how far would he have gone? So remember, x is talking about the number of hours. So I'm going to plug in 6 for x. Sometimes they might tell us the y. Like if he were to say, if he went a total of 48 miles, how long did he ride his bike for? So then we would have plugged 48 in for y and had to solve for x, the number of hours. Okay. Sometimes they could give you the y. They don't always give you the x, but most of the time they give you the x. All right. And now I just solve. Okay. So I just bring down my y and then I simplify. 4 times 6 is 24. So if he rode for 6 hours, how far would he have gone? He would have gone 24 miles. All right. This one I said is a little bit trickier because let's take a look. Hallie is helping to organize a birthday party at the bowling alley for a child that she babysat. A child that she baby costs $30 to hold to party at the bowling alley and then $5 per guest. Wow. Who wrote this sentence? I think it got cut off. Hallie is helping to organize a birthday party at the bowling alley for a child that she babysits. And then it costs $30 to hold a party at the bowling alley and then $5 per guest. Now the sentence makes a little bit more sense, doesn't it? But still a little bit harder than my other one. Okay, I need to find my rate. And you're like, which one is it? Because I see $5 per guest, and I also see this $30 to hold the party. So what's my rate? Is it the 5 per guest, or is it the $30? Well, here's your word of per, each, or every. And then remember how I said that's your hint of that's your rate? Whenever you see that word per, each, or every, usually that's going to be your rate. So this is the thing that's going to go in front of X. Okay, because it's $5 per guest. So however many guests you invite, that determines how much money you're going to pay. And I kind of just identified the Y and the X, didn't I? And again, money is the Y. After the word per, that's my X. So the number of guests invited is your X, and then that affects how much money it costs. Great. What do I do with that $30? Any ideas? Basically, it just gets tacked on at the end because no matter what, you have to pay this $30 just for holding the birthday party there at the bowling alley. So it's $30. It's a one-time fee. So you'll see the things like an initial fee, a one-time cost, a starting fee. That's going to be the thing that gets added on at the end. Okay. So it's $30 plus, depending upon how many guests you invite, $5 per person. So then this is the equation. Then they'll ask, okay, so if she's inviting 40 people, how much is it going to cost? Well, I'm going to plug in 40 for my X. And then I simplify. 5 times 40 is 200. And I get that by 5 times 4 is 20, and then just tack on a 0 at the end, plus 30. And 200 plus 30 is 230. So how much is it going to cost? It's going to cost her $230 to have 40 people at a birthday party at the bowling alley. $30 just for being at the bowling alley, and then $5 per person, and she's having 40 of them. Hopefully, now you've gotten a little bit better at identifying the independent and dependent variable. Look for the rate, and it separates your Y from your X. The Y comes first, and then the X comes after. Okay, it's Y per X. So down at the end, where it says the essential question, and if you flip back to the first page, it was asking, by the end, students will learn how to write an equation. So how do you write an equation from a word problem? Well, you do that by, you determine the independent and dependent variable and the rate in order to create your equation. So the independent is your X, your dependent is your Y, and then you know what to plug in. So if you identify which one's the X and which one's the Y, depending upon what information they give you, then you know what to plug it in for. And you're like, well, they always give me X. Not necessarily. What if I were to say, my budget is only $200. How many people can I invite? Well, then in that instance, I would plug a number in for Y of 200 and then solve for my X. Okay, but that'll come later. I just want you to identify that sometimes they don't always plug numbers in for the X. You will have to determine, do I substitute it in for the X or the Y? So you need to know what's the independent variable and what's the dependent variable and how to create the equation. But we're totally getting there, and hopefully you now understand how to write an equation.